Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello, everyone. Tracy here. Welcome back to another episode. I am so thankful to have you joining me for another fantastic conversation. But before we dive right in, a quick word from this week's sponsor.
The season's just about to get underway. What have you been up to?
Not sitting around. Off-season's busy. Got a couple rookies to train up, some new systems to learn. But we'll be ready.
And what canola are you growing this year?
We chose BY7204LL, Brett Young's new Liberty Link canola hybrid. Our neighbor grew 7204 last year, said it's high yielding, it's got good standability, pod shatter tolerance, and strong defense against club root. It's a game changer.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today, I have an amazing guest. I have Amy Monea, who is a therapist, coach, and owner of Herd Wellness Through Horses. Amy, how are you?
I am doing wonderful. How are you doing today, Tracy?
I am doing fantastic. I'm having a day of amazing conversations. And I want to say I'm excited for this one. It seems like the right word and the wrong word. We're going to be talking about suicide awareness and prevention. So I'm excited to bring this conversation to our audience and just have some real, raw, vulnerable, let's talk about it dialogue. So I know you're excited for the same type of episode. So welcome to the show. Before we dive in, why don't you tell our audience more about who you are, your background, what you do, all that good stuff?
Absolutely. So I am a registered clinical social worker in the province of Alberta and Saskatchewan. I have had the opportunity to work in various different capacities, some of those being in public mental health care, so both community work in rural communities as well as inpatient. So when their mental health gets to a crisis state or their complications due to mental illness and they end up in hospital, I had the opportunity to walk alongside those folks and help them in a social work capacity. And the last 10 years, almost 10 years, I've been in private practice. So providing counseling and therapy to individuals, some group work, that kind of stuff. One of the things that I specialize in is equine facilitated counseling, in addition to traditional like office type counseling, virtual counseling, that kind of stuff. I also love to speak about anything mental health, how horses can help people. And recently, I'm in the process of publishing my first book with a fabulous co-author named Angie Payne, and it's about horses and how they can help us with our mental health. So.
Fantastic. I used to have a horse, and man, that is clever because they are very therapeutic. I always said I would get around my horse and then I'd do that deep breath, like without even knowing it. Like I'd just be around my horse, hanging around, like giving him a scratch. And then all of a sudden I just exhale. And it was not something you normally do. You're always kind of tight and, just going about your day. But I'd always find a few minutes around my horse. I'd just,
Totally. And I think that I love that story. I have a very similar story too about a horse I had when I was a teenager, and same thing. Like I can remember what it felt like to take a deep breath. I could remember what it felt like when he put his head against my chest. I can remember what he smelled like.
yeah.
And so for some folks, it's way safer or easier to let our shoulders drop and settle into our bodies around a horse. Of course, people who've had bad experiences with horses, it's the other way. There might be a little bit of a trauma reaction, but for me and for many of my clients, horses, are amazing.
So clever. And congrats on your upcoming book. My goodness, I'll get you to talk about that too. Do you want to touch on that now or towards the end? But I make sure that we talk about that.
Yeah, we can do that at the end for sure.
Okay, perfect. curious. One more. I didn't even expect to go into horses, but I am curious. This is such amazing work that you do. Did you always know that you wanted to do this from a young age, or did you just end up in this field? I'm curious
Uh,
people all the time.
it was quite a journey, actually. So I was very lucky. My grandpa and my parents made sure that us grandkids and kids had access to horses since we were quite young. So they were always in my life. And one of my first jobs was working at a racehorse farm. So we'd take care of these horses who were on a break from the track. And so these high-powered animals. And one day while I was picking stalls, I kind of leaned up on my pitchfork, and I remember thinking, like, I wonder what difference it would make for people who don't live around horses or have them in their lives, if they could spend some time with them. And then kind of carried on with life. In high school, rodeo, like did all the regular things. When I went away to college, I thought I didn't like people. So I started in a Bachelor of Sciences program, and I was going to study grasses in the mountains. Lasted half a semester and then switched to social work. And I'd always thought about equine therapy, but it was just like, I describe it like if you had a helium balloon tied to your waist. Every time I turn around, it was there, but I'd be like, no, that's really silly. I don't want to do that, or too much work or too hard, and then or too much schooling or education. And then I ended up actually, once I started in social work, I just kept going and ended up in 7 years of training there, and then took a 2-year certification program in equine therapy. So and that program is called the Equine Gestalt Coaching Method, and it just met me kind of what I was learning in my clinical social work degree or master's degree, and what I was learning in my yoga class, what I was learning about group facilitation, what I didn't know about business, all that kind of stuff. So I love that program and everything it taught me, and it just brought everything together. So I love, the best thing about working with horses, I find, is they're just able to speed things up in a way that I can't. Yeah, for those folks who feel safe around them, they're just able to pull things out of people, and so that we can actually talk about it or work on it in a way that it might take me a long time through talk therapy to get there. So, yeah.
Interesting. I'm so fascinated. I want to come watch you do this. Wow, cool. Okay. I won't take us on 500 little rabbit trails on that. I'll focus here. Okay. So I'm curious. We hear a lot about mental health, mental illness. Do you want to touch on that and explain what is mental health and what's the difference from mental illness? Do you want to riff on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So spoiler alert, we all have mental health. So mental health is similar. You'd view it the same way you would view the term health. We all have health. We all have mental health. It just is a matter of like what kind of state that our mental health is in. So when we talk about mental health, we're talking about like things like behaviors, thoughts, emotions. It can even be like our interactions with other people, that kind of stuff. But if we're in a good state of mental health, we'll be able to function quite well, even if, we have a hard day or navigating a loss or things like that. We'll be able to process or work through those emotions. It might not cripple our beliefs about ourselves and things like that. And then mental illness is a part of that spectrum. So many of us in our lifetime will experience mental illness at some point. So these are diagnosable things like depression, anxiety, and it can also include things like psychological injury. So if we've witnessed or been part of or been very close to things like a tragic farm accident, say, those can cause psychological injuries. So this is where our thoughts, behaviors, emotions, reactions, responses functioning starts to be affected by them. And that would be a time where we would, just like health, if you had a health issue, you would probably consult a health professional. When we have mental health issues, same thing. Those would be the times that we would encourage people to consult a mental health or a healthcare professional. So it's just a part or a state on that mental health continuum. And I think it's also important, we can be practice good mental health whether we have a diagnosed mental illness or not. So if we're living with depression, we can still practice things to take care of our mental health and try to build up some frameworks for, keeping our thoughts positive, managing our emotions, stuff like that.
Okay. I always think, because I interview guests and we talk about it freely at home and with some people that I know. So to me, I'm fairly comfortable moving in and out of it, but I think there's still a lot of work to do in making this like a day-to-day conversation. And just like you said, like physical health, right? So I'm curious. I'm going to go very 101, pardon me. So bear with me. So do you want to talk about like, what's anxiety? Where do panic attacks fit? What is depression, bipolar, schizophrenia? And then a lot of the episode will talk about suicide, so we can leave that. But do you want to maybe touch on that a little bit and share any thoughts you have?
Mm-hmm. And so some of these would be particular specific mental health diagnoses, and they are, some of them are connected, some of them tend to happen together, and then some of them are very unique or specific. So things, depression and anxiety are probably the most commonly talked about mental illnesses. And depression would be like, it's like that lower energy type of mental illness where we are starting to lose interest in things. We're starting to lose withdraw in relationships. We're starting to, our thoughts might be like just like more pessimistic or like darker, that kind of stuff. Hopelessness, helplessness, and thoughts of suicide can be a symptom of depression as well. The other thing with depression too is it can look different depending on kind of where you're at in your life cycle, or it's just unique to each person. So anger and the short fuse can be a part of depression, and it can be a part of other things too. Anxiety would be more of that. So depression might feel like, and it's important to talk about what things feel like in our body, because that's usually how we start to notice them. So like that heavy feeling, we're sleeping a lot, or we're spending a lot of time in bed, but we're not sleeping. Just kind of like that, kind of heavy type feeling in our body, or that, that lower feeling in our belly. Anxiety is a little bit different, and anxiety is more like that type feeling where we are in that, this might feel kind of like that fight or flight place. We might be a little more torqued up or revving a little higher. Some people talk about it like a weight on their chest, or like a not a heaviness, but like a tightness. Muscles can be tight in the back of our necks and on our shoulders, that kind of stuff, or we might feel like we need to move a lot. So anxiety is when being anxious about something isn't a problem, typically, if the response matches the event. So if we're talking about something like a test, or we have a big exam or a big interview coming up, we might feel a little bit anxious about that. And that is normal, expectable, that kind of stuff. But it's if it doesn't lift, or if it's about everything else around, or it starts to affect, again, that function, like, okay, we're not sleeping now, or we're not eating well, or our stomach's so upset because we're so anxious that we can't eat, or it's hard to eat, that kind of stuff. Bipolar disorder is a little bit, it might have, or there are like low mood elements of it, and then there's also periods of higher or what was typically called like manic episodes, or where we feel a little bit higher. We might engage in high risk behavior that we normally wouldn't. So all of a sudden we're gambling all our money away, or we've sold everything, or we've bought everything, and without like thinking it through how we normally would. So that can be, those are can be symptoms of an illness like a bipolar disorder. And so the other things are, those would be probably more like your anxiety and depression are more of the common ones. And then we have ones that are disorders of, or like schizophrenia. I think you mentioned schizophrenia.
Yep.
So this is when we're dealing with like us elements of psychosis. And so this can happen too after like a high level of stress. We can have just a psychotic episode, or schizophrenia is where this is a longer term mental illness. So we might be seeing or hearing things or responding to things that other people aren't, or have very paranoid thought patterns. The world's out to get us, somebody's out to get us, that kind of stuff, where that might not actually, that's not actually happening. So all of these things can be very disruptive in a person's life, in their family, and on their farm if we're experiencing this stuff. And some things are normal or expected, like depression. If we go through a significant loss, if we are going through a big transition or like a divorce or things like that, we expect people to feel maybe a little bit lower mood, have a few days that are pretty tough. And it ends up being more about the timeline of it and the impact on function. So I'm going to talk about having a baby, because this is a big part of my story too. So having a baby, I had my own kind of mental health journey around it. But the difference between like the baby blues, which are incredibly common, and postpartum depression diagnosis is like, it's just a timeline. That's the difference. Okay. So it goes from something that's very common and very normal to something that is important to get assessed and treated. And we can go through normal things and still benefit from supportive family or seeing a doctor and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Okay, interesting. I'm glad you said that, because as we're listening and going through it, in life, we have natural ups and downs. Let's say, again, as farmers, and why I like to do these episodes, our identity is very much tied to our business, our financial position. Like, money makes the world go round. Honestly, let's admit it, right? We need money to pay bills. We don't have that. You're stressed out. That's going to potentially lead to some concerns. I like that you mentioned the timeline, because naturally our moods move up and down according to life and energy and sleep and that kind of stuff, events, bad stuff. But is there a timeline? Like, how would a farmer, and I know we're going to move to suicide, but so maybe this is a spot to ask that question. Maybe somebody's like, oh yeah, I'm in this funk, like it's so not me, and I can't get it going. Like, when does something that's natural move to a point where a farmer should be concerned about it, or a new mom? Where's that line?
And there are, like, in the book, like the DSM, which is the diagnostic and statistic manual for mental health or mental illnesses, there are specific timelines, but the important things to think about are if the stressor is gone, is my stress gone too?
Okay.
Right? If the stress stays, you need to deal with the stress. The other thing is sometimes stressors in the world of farming aren't like short-lived. Like if we're going on like a multi-year drought, that is not like something small. That's a big timeline. And so in those situations, commodity prices, in those situations where we can't change the stressor, we might be able to do some things to try to manage or like cut in our budgets, that kind of stuff. But we can't change the overall stressor. So we have to focus on managing the stress. So like the best we can do is try to make sure we're getting enough sleep, like all these kinds of things that are functioning. Are we really short patience with the ones we love the most, or are we kind of like doing okay? And if that doesn't lift, once we are aware of it or acknowledge it, or it's going on for a while. Those are things that we need to have a look at and would warrant a doctor's appointment or a phone call to a mental health resource, or even like checking in with some friends who are going through the same things. Do you feel this way too? Yes, I do. Or like, oh, it sounds like it's really tough for you. Okay. Time to connect with some further professional resources. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And that's the hard part with farming too, right? Maybe, I mean, in mainstream life, I call it, you lose a job. You're going to be stressed out. You get a new job. Things start picking up. With farming, that's the thing. You might have multi-years or even one bad year. You feel the effects of that for how long? So what is an acceptable time, right? And I love that you're so open to this, because who else has these conversations? Like, what's normal? When do we get concerned? How do we fix it? All this kind of stuff, right? The next one I'm going to ask you about, unless you want to add anything there, is moving to suicide. I'm going to be real and raw here because I have questions. There's a lot of stress in our industry, and I think we should talk about this. How does somebody get to suicide? Of course, we know the externals, right?
Yep.
They lose the farm, they have no money, whatever makes them want to feel that way. But is it a buildup to suicide? Are you in depression for a length of time? Like, is there some answers there? Do you know what I'm getting at?
So like the quick answer is like, it's hard to know. It's not always the same.
Right.
And so for some people, it can be a very impulsive, from like stressor or thing or thought to action. It can be a very short timeline.
Really?
And for other folks, it can be a part of depression over time or stress over time. And so when I was looking into some of the specific statistics, it's really interesting how things are we're starting to, thank goodness, get more research specific to farmers and agriculture and in our part of the world. And so this is really, really helpful because it will inform like resources and funding and support, whether like specific to mental health treatment, but also to community building, resiliency building, that kind of stuff, and stigma reducing programs. So I don't know that it's a jump to suicide, but it is, thoughts of suicide are quite common.
Are quite common?
I'm not going to say normal because it's when a person starts to experience thoughts of suicide, that is an indicator of, okay, I need to, it's getting more to a crisis or closer to an emergency level, or it's already at the emergency level. So thoughts of suicide also are on a spectrum. Sometimes it can be like, oh, if something happened and I didn't wake up in the morning, I would be okay with that. Sometimes life gets hard. And those thoughts, I mean, I felt those on hard days too. Those thoughts are thoughts of suicide, all the way to there is no way out. I can't figure this out. I've tried everything, thought of every different way. There's nothing I can do. There's no end in sight. And this is the only option. My family would be better off without me. I'm a burden. And here's how I'm going to do it and when I'm going to do it. So these are really active thoughts of suicide with a plan, that kind of stuff. So some of the research in this part of our world says that 1 in 4 farmers in Canada have experienced thoughts of suicide of any of those types in the past year. That's a big deal. There's not very many illnesses or anything like that where it's 25% less in the past year. So it is quite common, also very hard to talk about. Of course, there are, like with depression, thoughts of suicide can be a symptom. So sometimes it is a part of a mental illness. Sometimes it's that stress that stacks up over time, or sometimes it's that one thing. And yeah. Well, and the other thing too is like if a person is, you know, has issues with addiction too, that can also increase the risk, or yeah, that kind of stuff.
Interesting. And I think of one thing, you know, Wall Street, when the market crashes, you always hear of people committing suicide. Like they jump off buildings because they're financially done. They lost billions. So that would be one of those sudden things. I imagine life was good. They were rich. They were loaded. Everything was good. And then the market crashed and they're like, I can't recover. And then they take,
How do I go home to my family?
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right. That thinking gets so like hard and fixed from right now. And yeah, so with farming, the two factors that we know are that like that financial piece is such a big part of farming. Like, can I pay my bills? Can I service my debt? Can I do what I like what I said I was gonna do? That is a big factor when it comes to suicide in farmers, and also that identity. And you mentioned it, like this, the identity of being a farmer is so closely tied to our self-worth that if for any reason those are separated, it can be very difficult for many people. And what is one of the biggest topics we talk about in farming now? Like transition planning, succession, retirement, that kind of stuff. Retirement is something that, you know, if you're not in that state, you're like, oh yeah, that'll be great. You can do whatever you want all day. But for farmers, we're like, I am a farmer before, like I'm a farmer before I'm Amy. It gets that tightly tied to our identity. It can be very difficult to, if for any reason you lose that identity, if you like get an illness or an injury or have to transition because of finances or anything like that, or even if we transition for good reasons because we are excited for retirement or the next thing, it still is a transition that can come with some tricky things. So
well, right. Isn't that the meaning? That's as a farmer, all you've ever done, all you know, potentially for many people is farming. Now, all of a sudden you can't do it. You look at any retired person. They retire, they go idle, they get sick and miserable, right? So yeah, you could just see it. And in farming, I experienced that too. Whew, this is fairly vulnerable, but very vulnerable. But during the pandemic, when everything was going down and supply chain was being cut, I'm like, oh my gosh, are my advertisers going to cancel? I experience how wrapped up I am in the identity of this platform. We're farmers as well, but Anthony's the main farmer. This is my focus, my main focus. And of course, I love what I do. Like, work is fun, but you don't think about it until something goes wrong. And then you're like, well, what am I going to do? This is my business. If something crashed, I'm like, oh, I see. This is exactly how farmers feel when it, right? And then you have that added pressure of a fourth generation family farm. And if you lose that because the crops weren't good, like, whoa, perfect storm.
Yeah, crops weren't good, or your herd gets hit by an illness and you have to go through a depopulation event. Like, none of the things that a person wants,
Right.
but these things happen and we have to navigate them. And like your work, it's so tied up, being so tied up with who you are. And when like we're living our dream, and then that dream is like, and our identity are split from, you know, what we can actually do or capable of in this like environment that is so all these stressors or factors that are so external. Yeah, totally. And so exactly, like it can just be not just one, the pandemic wasn't like just one thing, but you know, something totally external, and then it like affects everything. How we think about ourselves, our value in our family, our value in our community, even our value to our, like, if I'm not a farmer, who am I? And what purpose do I have?
Right. That's what I went through. I'm like, well, Tracy, you have skills, but you're just going through that. I'm like, oh, wow.
Right. That self-talk, like you have skills, you're a good person, you're smart, you'll figure this out. And
You can
then
do
that
other
other
stuff.
side of like,
Yeah.
can I don't know. It's just so
Yeah.
hard.
So I can,
Scary.
ever since the pandemic hit, and then I personally questioned that. Yeah, we've had some bad years on the farm. Of course, we're in cattle, right? So and all
Yep.
around. But ever since I personally went through it with my business, I'm like, oh, I get this. I really get how farmers are so wrapped up in their business. It's just one and the same. And then, like we just said, and this is why I was super excited for you to come on. I had a feeling. I just really wanted to get real and vulnerable. I mean, this is real. This is what we do. This is what we think.
Mhm,
But we are so much more than our land and our farms, and suicide doesn't need to happen, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, I 1,000% agree with you. And I also think it's really important to say we can still do everything right when it comes to suicide prevention, and we are still going to lose people. Because
Oh,
I think there's so much that is, when we lose someone to suicide, the survivors and the guilt and like the regret that is carried. Being in this field, I've seen, I mean, a personal, a family experience with suicide, but I also have like in my work, and there have been times we've done everything right, the family's done everything right, everything has been in place, and people, we still lose people. And I think part of that too is like just the research, like we're learning more all the time, we're getting better all the time, we're doing our best all the time, trying to make sure supports are in place and things like that. And we're like, when it comes to the human brain, are we ever going to be like done, we know it all,
yeah.
that's it? And so yeah, I think that part was just important to say, like, yeah,
That was that was
there is no reason, and it's also, yeah, it might still happen.
so yeah, just those things we can't explain, right?
Mhm.
Okay, well then that leads perfectly into the next question. So all of us here in this industry, we know people that have died by suicide, and often you'll hear, wow, they were so happy. There's so many misconceptions. I didn't even know. Like, and then people, exactly like you said, if you know, that's one different thing, but so many people are taken by surprise. So I think what I want to ask you is, how do you recognize it?
Yeah, and I think like we're there's things that are research and science of like, if someone is experiencing thoughts, they may be showing you these signs, or these might be the signs if someone is experiencing thoughts. So the things that are important to watch for is like those big transitions, right? So if somebody loses something, those first, like that first week, everybody shows up, but
Yeah.
then like it's like a few weeks and then months and then years. So big transition. We're also going to be looking for things like changes in behavior. So all of a sudden, and also there doesn't have to be a big transition. It could be there, it could be not, or big change or big loss. But the changes in behavior, people may start to withdraw, and all of a sudden they're not showing up at the parent council meetings anymore, or they're not showing up the church. They're not showing up at church as much, or now they're sitting at the back by themselves, and they were really engaged before, or we realize like phone calls are now like weeks apart, or stuff like that, or they haven't shown up for coffee or whatever. That can be an indication, like that withdrawal piece. There can be another side of that too, where it's like some people lean in really hard right before a suicide attempt. So they might be making peace with people, or giving things away, or doing stuff like that you're like, this is really weird. Like, I appreciate that apology, but that is so strange. That was however many years ago, or whatever that is, or like, I know I'm a good friend, but like, it's strange that they just phoned me to tell me how great of a friend I am. It's interesting. So it can be any of those changes in behavior like that. And then that talk of like, yeah, well, what's the point? And it doesn't matter anyways. And that kind of like hands in the air, whatever, or they'd be better off without me type of thing. Those type of things, and like I mentioned, if there's addiction involved, that can be something to pay attention to. Yeah, anything, anything kind of like that. Yeah.
And obviously, if people are having those thoughts, does anybody ever verbalize it? And maybe I'm going somewhere weird with this, and maybe depending on the personalities, that'll play into it too. If somebody's really introverted, they keep things to themselves naturally. If somebody's very verbal, like, what's the point? And says that this family would be better off without me. Like, obviously, people are caught off guard. So majority of the stuff is just kept in people's head and they put on an act.
Totally. So another big part of when we experience thoughts of suicide, it can be quite a shameful thing. So it can come with those feelings of hopelessness, helplessness, a burden. Yeah. These are like the shame things. And so shame is what makes things so much bigger, because we keep them to ourselves. We don't want to tell anybody, that kind of stuff. We might not even make eye contact the same that we used to make eye contact. And so for some people, they might say those things, but a lot of times it's hard, like keeping those things in, because you also don't want to hurt the people around you by saying, like, I'm having these thoughts. Okay. Yeah. Sometimes we don't even know we're having those thoughts. It's just like, this is so hard. I don't know what I'm going to do. And then until somebody asks us, or like someone opens the door to say, oh yeah. And sometimes those thoughts are very active, and we are more aware of what they are.
Wow. There's a lot of ins and outs, right? Like, I just want to dig in and give like a blueprint to people. Like, if you spot this, do this. And I mean, we have some good stuff to cover in this. Just having the conversation right now is amazing here, and everybody's starting to talk about it in the industry. That's what we need, right? If somebody's watching this and they're thinking these things, going, oh, geez, I didn't realize I was that bad. Or, okay, I'm not alone. Whatever it is, right? The hopes that we have by opening up these conversations.
And that's another big factor when it comes to farmers, is like not feeling alone. And so one of the things is like, when someone we love is experiencing thoughts of suicide, it is so scary. So I am good at talking about it and good at asking about it with clients. Yeah. But if somebody in my family was experiencing thoughts of suicide, oh my goodness, right. I'm gonna need someone else to help. It would be my quick thing, or like, don't think this way. This is not good. Because it's so hard to watch people we love suffer. But that's not what we need when we're suffering. We don't need someone to jump us to the other side of the mud, but someone to like sit in the mud with us. And so a lot of people are like, I'm so scared to ask about it because I'm worried about saying the wrong thing. Yeah. And so I would rather you try, and then and even if it's going to be messy when you ask, because it's hard to ask. But if you can avoid adding to more shame or more burden. So even if everything is in someone I care about is experiencing these thoughts, and everything inside of me is screaming like, don't do that, because I just want to fix it. That's not what they need. That's about my own fear right now, or my own worry. That's not what the person needs. And that might contribute to more shame or burden or disconnect. And like you said, you just want to feel like we're not alone. And that's what helps people talk. So, yeah, as much as we can just stay with a person, and not jump to like, don't do that. Can't you see what you have? You're so lucky. You've got a beautiful family or a beautiful farm or whatever.
Shame button.
That might be true, but that will just make me feel more like a loser or inadequate and that kind of stuff. Because you're right, I have all this stuff and I still can't get it together. So, but if you say that, it's okay to be like, oh my gosh, sorry, that was about me and my own, like, worry. I really care about you. Sorry, that was about me. Tell me more. And it's okay to apologize and to like do that right in the moment. The whole reason we're trying to change this is it's because it's people we care about that are struggling. So, and it can be yourselves that are struggling, you know, people that care about us. So.
That was one of my questions. I think, and even myself, I'd be like, oh my gosh, like I'm scared to ask, like I'm concerned, but I'm scared to ask. Like, what if I offend them? Like that would be very real, right? It's like, I'm going to ask them this like big question, like,
Yeah.
and I'll ask you maybe how to ask in a bit, but I think that's natural that we'd be concerned to ask, say the wrong thing. So, and you touched on it, and I want to just clarify that it's better to ask and open the door to the conversation and maybe do it a little bit messy and
Yeah.
imperfect than going, oh, I don't know how to bring this up. I'm not a therapist. So,
Yeah.
right.
And the truth is, like, unless you're a therapist, you're not a therapist. And even though I'm a therapist, I can't be a therapist for my own family.
Yeah.
But to ask the question, it's better to live with the risk. I'd rather risk offending someone by asking the question than risk living with regret and not asking the question.
Yeah.
And so I've been thinking about this because this is the other myth is that if we ask the question, we'll give a person the idea.
Yes.
So all the research I've looked at, that is not even, that's not true. All the people I've asked this question to, are you experiencing thoughts of suicide with what's going on and the level of stress you're under? That is never been true. You won't give someone the idea to do that because if they're not experiencing it, wouldn't it be a good thing for someone to be like, what? You think I'd have those thoughts?
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, I just wanted to ask because I care about you and I'm worried about you. But the other thing that can happen is if someone is not ready to disclose and they say nope, or like, how dare you ask me, they know that you're okay to ask that question. And so this has happened to me where someone will come back a couple weeks later or later and say, hey, you remember that question you asked me? And I might remember, I might not. And they'll say like, I wasn't completely honest, or I wasn't, but things have gotten worse and I'm really struggling and I am worrying or like wondering if life is worth living. So when we show people that we're willing to have that conversation, it opens the door and then the door stays open. They're welcome to come back, or you can ask that question again. If they're down the road, there's other things, or you're still like, no, they're not okay. Something's up.
I like that you said that, and I could see that happening. You throw them a bit of a lifeline, wouldn't it be? Like, even if they deny it, maybe that's the wrong terminology, but if they're not ready to talk about it, they get offended. You threw them a lifeline and you open that door, like you said. You showed that you have an awareness and you're a safe place. You're automatically, exactly like you said, an open door for that. So you just kind of just said, hey, I'm here, right? I like that. That's interesting. Yeah, because that would be that's big, that's heavy. You don't want to offend people. Like, honestly, I find human communication to be challenging at best, right? Even between our parents, our spouses. Like, I'm not a master communicator. I can be pretty bold and maybe not always cautious with my words. We're not all master communicators that know exactly what to say. So, hey, are you contemplating this? That's
Right.
pretty, yeah. Now, okay, let's say I want to ask you that. What's a nice wording? If you're concerned about somebody, what's a nice, safe wording?
So a kind of like a script of it. I mean, you can have like, you change it as you would, but like,
Yeah.
hey, you're gonna find like a quiet, safer place to be able to talk to them. Now, sometimes it's safer to like, sit down, have a coffee, be looking people in the eye. Sometimes it's going along with somebody, jumping in the combine, riding with them, or whatever. and it sometimes, like they say, sometimes gender specific, like women typically like look at each other, talk to each other, and then like to talk side by side while doing something. So that could be possible. But you're gonna find a quieter, safe place to say like, hey, I have noticed something. So I've noticed that you're not showing up on the egg committee meetings like you used to. I've noticed I've walked past you a couple times in town and you haven't even seen me, or like your eyes were down, you didn't even notice me, or you seem a lot shorter, and maybe there was a loss, and I know that it's been a few months since you lost her or whoever or whatever, or you had to sell, or it's been a tough year, another dry year. And you can do it however you want. I heard this lady talking where sometimes when people go through hard things like that, they can experience thoughts of suicide.
Yeah.
Are you experiencing thoughts of suicide? Then, as soon as you ask that question, your job is to stop talking and wait. And it might be the longest 5 seconds or longest 5 minutes of your life, but your job is to wait. Sometimes people sidestep the question. Sometimes people will try to change the subject, and you can follow that for a bit and ask the question again. But to just wait and give the space for a person to tell you. And then when they tell you, it really is important to take some training, because just like first aid, I can tell you the basics, but take the training because you'll have more of the skills. But what we're really looking for is, do they have a plan, and are they willing to get help? If they're willing to get help, then we try to, we'll go through some resources, but give them a phone number. Okay, I'll go make an appointment with my doctor tomorrow. Okay, great. I'll call you tomorrow and make sure you make that appointment. And if they're like, no, I don't know. Tonight I'm done. Tonight's it. I'm done. Then it's a crisis line or a call to 911 stuff.
Okay.
So, but those are big decisions. And so a crisis line or a professional on the other end of the phone to walk you through what to do is a really good idea. Yeah.
Wow, it's so hard because there could be so many situations, right?
Mhm.
And people answer and receive that differently for so many reasons. I mean, personality types and where they're at, and all of that is hard to know how to react, and even
Totally.
at what level to react. So again, there's no cookie cutter answer, but you're in the truck. They say, yeah, I've thought about it. Honestly, I mean, what's the point of living? The farm doesn't make money. We're in debt. We'll never get out. Whatever the situation is, if they admit it, you help make them an appointment, unless they're like, yeah, well, I'm done. Then,
I'm not going to make that appointment anyways. Okay, what do you mean?
yeah,
Tell me more. Are you planning on ending your life tonight? Like, do you have a time? Do you have a plan? And then like things like, what is the plan? And so as a professional, these are the things that we're trying to assess. Like, what is the plan? Do you have, like, are there firearms in the home? Are they, that kind of stuff. Like, can we can we do whatever or like, can somebody take the key? All that kind of stuff. I don't know, like those type of things, or yeah. But
it's
these
so,
are again professional
yeah,
decisions. Or if you happen to show up and somebody is in the process or has attempted, then you just call mine. If you say like, okay, if they're not going to talk to you, if they're not going to, put everything down, you just need to call mine. It's very scary and it's very hard, but it's very important. Yeah.
yeah, and that could be hard too. I'll just say one more thing. What level of intensity? Because you don't want to jump the gun, right? So let's say you're
No.
drinking with your buddies, and he's
Mhm.
just like, you know what? Often I just think of putting a gun to my head because obviously this farming thing isn't going to work. And then they leave. Like,
Mhm.
whoa, Okay, do we call 911? Do we assume he was joking? Like, these are the,
Totally.
right? Wow.
Totally. And so those would be the times, okay, like it's important to get them on the phone, or can somebody go stay with them tonight? Or like,
Mm,
is there somebody at home that will make sure he got home, and,
yeah,
who I
clever.
can, and make sure that he's okay on that end, that kind of stuff.
Yes, there we go. I'm glad. I feel so odd saying these things, but these are the little nitty gritty things that you might be in those situations and you don't know how to react. Like, let's say they leave after saying that or shortly
Yeah,
after, you can just pop by their house, like kind of follow them home and just pop by their house and say, "Hey, I wanted to check in on you," or
yeah,
whatever, right? Just show up. Just show
yeah.
up.
Or you said something that I really care about you, and kind of got me worried, so I needed to just check in and see
Yeah,
what's going on, or how you really doing, and stuff.
good.
Yeah,
This is,
I think it's like the risk, but more like the ensuring of safety. Like, am I, are we sure that they're going to be safe? And if
yeah.
we're not, okay, then what's the next step to make sure that there is safety in place?
Hmm.
Yeah,
And then call 911 if you really suspect something, right?
yeah, and it would have to be like pretty serious. So like you would have to
Yeah.
know like that there's like intent, they
Right.
are at imminent risk of harm to themselves or others.
Yeah.
So I mean, we're talking about harm to yourself. So like if, yes, is at imminent risk, if you're quite confident that they're going home to hurt themselves or to end their life, then yeah, that's a 911.
Wow. Okay. Well, those are a
The
lot.
other like very important part
Yeah.
is very hard to be the helper too. So if you happen to go through one of these situations, it's important to go like debrief and talk it out, or like process your own stuff after with somebody, because this is it's a lot. It's a lot. And so taking care of ourselves is important too. Um, if we're the helper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know you touched on this before, and I'm going to bring it back here. We're talking about somebody else, but let's say it's me and I'm
Right.
going, I don't know if life is worth living. What do I do? Like, what, when should I worry about myself? Let's turn it on us, not another. When do I start worrying about that? Those thoughts for myself.
Totally. And so, like, as a very biased mental health worker, I'm like, as soon as you're like, oh, my thinking isn't quite right, that's the time.
Okay.
I think it's hard to, for some people it's not hard, but for many people it's hard to say like, hey, I'm not doing okay. So when we notice like, okay, this funk is not lifting, or this funk is now like I'm now like not functioning as well, or like I'm experiencing these thoughts, or like wild how my bank account can determine how I feel about if I should be alive or not. Like even that awareness, okay, this is like something's not, or I'm not okay. It is important to just tell somebody. We are not always going to get the help we need the first person we tell. So we might tell a family member who is so worried and freaks out, or we might not want to tell a family member because we don't want to worry them or burden them more, they're stressed, that kind of stuff. It's okay, you just need to tell somebody. And so you can call a crisis line and they will talk you through it and help you come up with a plan. If you have a relationship with your family doctor, or you got a good doctor's office in town, just phone and make an appointment with the doctor. Doctors have some training in mental health and assessing these type of things. And it's also good to get a baseline, because they might say, okay, we're at kind of this level. I want you to come back in a week. If things change for the worse, you call and you come, or you just show up in the waiting room and I'll get you in right away. Or I want to see you in a week and we'll see if things have lifted or changed at all. So, or you've got like, there's like local mental health offices and stuff like that. The other interesting thing about farmers typically don't want to go see people in their own community. they're worried someone's going to see you while you're walking into the doctor or the counselor's office.
Right.
So farmers will drive hours and hours to come see me. There's a counselor like just down the road. Nope. But the same people from here will go far ways away just for that like anonymity in the community type thing.
That makes sense.
The beautiful thing about small communities is we care about each other. We usually know kind of what's going on. But when we're like going through something like a mental health crisis or navigating a mental illness, we might not want people to know. It's just important that somebody knows. And then going through that way. And there are many different ways to treat mental illnesses. So there might be like a medication component, there might be counseling, there might be like a building in a self-care routine, that kind of stuff. But starting somewhere and talking to someone who can help you navigate it. Yeah.
Yeah. And even I'm just thinking for farmers, I could get that. I'm a very private person, so I wouldn't want my whole community knowing. I mean, nobody's going to judge you, but that's what you worry. So going to the next town over, or I know there's crisis lines. You don't want your family to know. I mean, in reality, we should tell them, but you might not want to. Hop in your truck and call a crisis line, right? Don't leave it. Don't ignore it.
Exactly. And a crisis line will help you sort through like, okay, is this an emergency now? Or can you like do these things in the meantime, or there's some resources, let's get you connected with those resources. So the crisis line will be able to help you get the best resources for what you're looking for, what you need. Or your local doctor's office will have an idea of kind of what's available in the area. Or if you're like, hey doc, I don't see anybody here. Okay, I can send you over there or whatever. There's something else I was going to say. Yeah, and it's also okay to just show up at Emerge and be like,
yeah,
I am not okay, and they will assess you. Some emergency departments have mental health workers. Sometimes it'll be the doctor who assesses you, that kind of stuff, and they're assessing for your level of risk and treatment and that kind of thing.
Oh boy, that's a conversation and a half.
Yeah, great questions.
Thank you. I had
Trying to think if there's anything else I'm missing that I wanted to say, but go ahead and
prevention,
mental
health, working on keeping our mental health strong. I guess we slide down the scale to mental illness, but is there prevention that we can do to keep our mental health strong?
So sometimes, like I said, we will end up with navigating a mental illness or a psychological injury, and sometimes they can be stress induced, sometimes they're not, sometimes they just and there are other factors. So they can't always be prevented, but for the stress induced mental illnesses, we can do things to manage our stress. And so these are the things that people talk about all the time that are like so for me, like they're just repeated over time. Exercise, make sure you're getting enough rest, make sure you're like, you could try meditating. So some people will listen to really good podcasts, or they'll get meditation apps on their phone to like help them fall asleep, or to be able to like relax all the muscles in their body. A lot of times we don't even realize we're tense until we like actually start to relax. Oh, I was carrying a lot of stress on my shoulders, or in my forehead, or whatever. So doing intentional things like that. Also important to take a break every now and then. So if you can take holidays in the seasons where things slow down a little bit, and whether it's like a holiday to Mexico, or a holiday to go visit a friend, or take the kids and go do something somewhere else, that's important too, to get a little bit of a break and to be able to come back, keep things in. It helps them, can help a little bit with perspective and decision making and stuff like that. So really, it's managing the stress And so, yeah, that piece of like, you can change the stressor, and if you can't change the stressor, then the best you can do is try to manage your stress. So those type of things, staying connected with your community, whatever that looks like. So if you enjoy playing hockey, like go to your hockey rec league or your curling rec league or ball in the summer or whatever it is. But places where you'll see people who they might know you really well. They might just know you as a ball player, but another place where you'll see other people. Farming is it's an isolating career. And so getting out and seeing other people is important, and staying connected with, if you've got some good friends or some family, staying connected and keeping talking and getting that support. I think one of the other things that has really helped with stigma reduction, and we still have a long way to go, but it's amazing being able to, like, having been in this industry for the time I have and watching the change in stigma, and the, what would you call it? Like all the efforts, the stigma reduction campaigns and stuff like that, is when we share if we've struggled. So it's not something like, you don't need to broadcast it. That's not what I'm saying, but in the quiets of those conversations, if you're asking somebody and you have your own experience, say like, hey, I've had those thoughts before too, and I'm really glad I told somebody, or I'm really glad you told me. Thank you for telling me. I've been there too. Let's figure out together what we can do about it. Yeah.
Okay, powerful. One thing that I had covered with a farm business advisor, debt mediation. So there's a lot of farmers that just farm, and if it goes well, it goes well. If you have a year you lose, you just try again next year, right? But if it's that bad financially, and this is looping to the bigger theme of my show, is seeking help with your financials. If you're having some bad years and you're like, oh my goodness, like I'm having a hard time. As farmers, we're kind of self-taught on all these skills, right? And we're not a CEO, we're not a marketer, like all these skills we expect to be amazing. If it's a financial problem, realize that there's probably solutions with your banker, with somebody that takes care of debt mediation. Like, your life is more valuable than your finances. People can help you. They won't judge you, right? Sit down with somebody and say, hey, like, I don't think I can make my payments. Like, right? That professional to take that load off, because if that's the main thing that's having somebody contemplate that, there's professionals to help too, right?
And I think like having that information so available on like resources pages and things like that, so that when people get to a place of like, I don't know what to do, I've done everything and it's still like, we're going down still, I don't know what to do. If you're the helper or you're the person like looking at resources, oh, I never tried this, I can do that. Or I can give that a try too, or, suggesting that to a friend or a family member, that kind of stuff. Because there are a lot of resources, and we are like a resourceful bunch, and if we can share with each other what we know or what we found, then there are like there's so many more options and so many more opportunities to navigate some of these struggles. The other thing that is important to mention is sometimes when we're looking for professional help, so we are experiencing these thoughts, we go to the doctor, we call a counselor, and it's like, well, that didn't work because maybe it wasn't a fit or you didn't get what you needed. So a lot of people will just write off counseling because they had one appointment and it did not go well or it wasn't helpful. It's important to find someone that is a fit. And so even telling a family member or like having someone help you navigate that until you find the right fit, that's important too. But yeah, I really like that. Like, finding professionals to help you navigate debt and things like that. And it doesn't have to be the end of the road. There are other things.
Yeah. I could see a lot of people, if they don't know that people can sit down with them and sort through their finances and help them refinance and help them get out of it. Like there's people that can help you do that. And I love that you said that, because onus on me, I just realized when we do these episodes, every guest that I talk to at the bottom, I do show notes, but they get lost within these episodes on episodes. So if somebody's like, wow, I remember listening to Tracy's episode with Amy and I want those resources, that could be 4 pages down, right? For the number of
Right.
episodes. I just realized that for the amount I talk about this, I really do need a resource page, crisis,
Because, yeah,
right? And then
totally. You could have it like a little menu or like debt crisis,
yeah,
health crisis. Yeah.
yeah. And then list all these great organizations, because there are so many amazing people across this industry, but I also find a little bit challenging too. It's very fragmented by province. There's a lot of
Totally.
organizations, and that's amazing that we have that. And that's, some of them are fairly new, but it's very fragmented. So I cover an episode about Manitoba farmer wellness. Okay, what if that farmer's not from Manitoba, right? So even for me, I think I'm going to get on that and put that page together.
Cool.
Yeah. Wow. Is there, that was, whew, whew, I feel tired.
How are you doing after that conversation?
Oh,
Did you
you're such
engage
a
in a little
counselor.
self-care tonight?
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you're such a counselor. How thoughtful you are. Well, that is, I mean, that's heavy. Like I feel it. I feel good that we had this conversation. It's heavy. I think this has been so valuable. I'm good. I am good. I'm happy we had this chat.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I think, yeah, these types of things are so important, and people like you with these types of platforms making it a priority to have this episode, and you've had other episodes, mental health and wellness related. Like it's important, and then to get in front of or in the ears of farmers, and for people to know like um that kind of stuff, and that there are things out there, and we can navigate them together. So yeah, the other thing that I wanted to just say is like resources. There are, yeah, like you said, so many provincial resources. Some provinces have farm specific crisis lines. Some, like in Canada wide, we have 988 now, which is your crisis hotline. So you can call 911 if it's an emergency, you need an ambulance. You can call 988 if it's an emergency and you need to figure out what to do. Or you're contemplating, you're experiencing thoughts of suicide, or someone you love is experiencing thoughts of suicide, call 988. So that is relatively new, and that's an amazing resource that we have Canada-wide. And then there are more and more farm suicide prevention courses. So I'm connected with AgNo in Alberta, and they have courses that are available throughout Canada, either virtually or in person. They can travel to your community, and then in Alberta for that. And then there are other organizations too that offer similar services, or mental health first aid, that kind of stuff. You can work with your ag society and bring that to your community. Totally. There's a lot more opportunities to engage our communities in some of these bigger conversations and get more people equipped in communities for when somebody struggles. And when I say when, like, I really mentioned that stat 1 in 4 in 12 months. And I don't say that to scare people, like to be on the lookout. But I mean, 1 in 4, that's not, it's probably somebody we love is thinking about it. And so it's important to prioritize, yeah, learning about this, having some resources, even on our phones. So we have those conversations. We're just trying to manage our feelings and think about saying what we're going to say next. But then we have those resources in our notes, or that we can just be like, oh yeah, this is what I'm supposed to, or who we can call and how we can navigate this. So, yeah.
Do you work directly with farmers remotely? Let's say somebody was watching this and they wanted to do a session. Do you do direct sessions online with farmers?
Yeah, so I'm only registered in Alberta and Saskatchewan, so they would have to be residents of those 2 provinces.
Okay.
But it's also important for you to know, like, I'm not a crisis counselor. So if you're experiencing these thoughts, you need to talk to someone who's available right now. You don't need to wait for me to return your email or to book in, like, in a couple of weeks, that kind of stuff. So get in touch with those crisis resources, make sure that you're got that part navigated. So I'm not crisis, I would be like the next kind of level once the crisis is stabilized, then we can work through maybe some of those belief patterns or thought patterns or those type of things. So yeah, I do see clients virtually across Alberta and Saskatchewan. I do see people in person. My office, we moved it to the farm. So if you want to see me in office, yeah, you get to come to a farm. We have a beautiful facility here, an arena that I do the equine therapy in, and then there's a kitchen lounge type area where we've got some nice couches where you can come and yeah, you can do office sessions there. Just outside of Carstairs. And yeah, if you're curious about my work, I know I mentioned the book, it's coming out October 15th. And so you can find me on my website. It's heardwellness.ca, but it's heard as in listening. So HEARD wellness.ca. And then I'm on Instagram as well, Heard Wellness, but the S's are 5s because I do feelings. I don't really do technology, and in case me and Instagram had a thing. So Heard Wellness, but the S's are 5s. So,
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And then about your book, what's your book about? What's it titled?
So it is called Mindful Humanship, The Knowingness of Horses. And so I wrote this with my business partner that I do a lot of like group stuff and different projects together with. Her name's Amy Monea. And we wanted to, people ask, like, how does it work? How does the equine therapy work? So we wanted to be able to kind of open the door a little bit and show you or share, show people what it could look like. So we've had some folks who have granted us permission to share their stories and change all the details and stuff like that so that it's still anonymous and confidential. However, the stories of what horses do is incredible. So things like, I don't know, I can ask somebody how they're feeling and they might not be able to find the words, but then a horse puts their nose on their chest and then the tears fall, or a horse might act something out or demonstrate some behavior and it has significant meaning to a person. And so these are just a collection kind of some of those stories, and also talking a little bit about our thoughts on mental health and the big things like shame. We talk a lot about shame in there because I think it's such a big part of, I don't know, Western culture and where we live in, about how important it is to be like a rugged, independent, and if you can't, you're not good enough, and how much that it might be helpful in situations of like you get back fucked off, you get back on the horse, but then it can be very harmful in other situations. So yeah, those are the type of things we talk about.
Sounds beautiful. Is it available? Like, is it on Amazon just yet, or do we have
No, it won't be on Amazon until October 15th. So yeah, as soon as that goes live, it'll be on the social media stuff, and you'll be able to follow that link and buy it there.
Okay. And if you want to, let me know when it goes live and I'll promote it to our audience for you.
Okay.
And push it
That'd
out
be
on my
incredible.
website and help you get that out. So if you
Okay.
think, then I'll help you get that out there for everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tracy.
You're welcome. Thank you, Amy. This was an amazing conversation. I had a feeling you were just going to be, I mean, all the people in this industry that counsel and work with people are amazing, but I just had a feeling that you were going to be the gal to go real and raw and just walk me through it and just 101 it. I think these are the important conversations. Like, somebody might be saying they're thinking these thoughts, or somebody might be at the bar with a buddy and then this situation comes up, right? So I think the more conversations like this that we have, the better. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You're amazing.
Thank you.
You in the audience, you're welcome. Thank you. You in the audience, if you liked this conversation as much as I did, you valued it, and you know how important it is for our industry, like it, share it, get it out there so all farmers can see this. We are a big community, but small. So the more we can help each other, the better. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.